Hey, Ian.
Hey there.
Steve.
Good morning. Here we are.
How goes the struggle?
It's not a struggle, it's a joy.
Good answer. I have an unmastered song to send you today.
Perfect. You are the universe. The universe makes a set list. So that's what's next.
Cool.
And yeah, everything, there's weather all over. And some is stormy and some is calm. And it's interesting how it shifts. Storms come and go, but we stay calm.
What are you exactly referring to?
Life in general.
Okay.
Good morning, Daryl. Good to see you.
Yes, good to see you too, Steve.
Yeah. I don't know what we have to record today necessarily. We're, it's a lot to say.
A
Doing
lot
a
to
lot of mastering.
a lot to say, but not a lot to record.
Well, I'm working on this audio project, which is aiming for when things become. It's basically building the little battery-powered car before the battery is ready.
Okay.
But good morning, Fabian. But the car still needs to be built while the battery is in process of being built, and then the farther we get with the car, especially as we get all the specifications and standards down for what the battery is going to provide, then when the battery is ready to go, you plug it in the car and you go. As compared to waiting for the battery to be done and then say, what can I do with this?
Yeah.
This is one of the things that our chain is in the midst, being based on mathematics, fortunately, of becoming. So working in parallel on that is where I'm putting my focus.
And your focus is more on hardware, right?
So you're calling me moron now? No, it is absolutely. I've been doing this for decades, and I've got the best engineers in the world with me, and it can be quiet and being done, and all of a sudden it'll be done.
Right. Cool. What's it going to look like?
So about that big.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, it's a reference design, so anybody can, once it gets, it's just like RSong. RSong is a reference design. It's not meant to be an end in itself, but more of a method to for deployment. And so it's, it all takes time
and energy.
Well, that's what we have, and where we put the energy becomes the important thing, especially as we get tired.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I'm finding myself focusing on so many different things that are part of the big picture, and I find that well, I think that was one of the issues we had with Resonate, is kind of we found our heads kind of spinning a little bit because there's just so many things to conquer, and so yeah, lots to sort through, and so it gets confusing as to kind of where you're going to apply your focus.
Yeah, it's like a flatland character being put into space for the first time. You can only see a little small bit of it, and as you sweep your vision, you sort of make up from your sweeps what's actually out in space. But usually you just get this very, very narrow, planar vision And so building this shape in a direction that none of us can point leads to a lot of interesting, anthill building and Columbia and crashing,
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, great.
Yeah, guys, I have a question. I guess I'm addressing this question. I'm addressing it to everyone, but particularly to Greg and to Kayvon. Well, the first question to everybody: has anybody in the world yet proven or put a song or a collection of songs out there and embedded somebody's data, like mycelia, and then allowed for the financial distributions from that song to be distributed to multiple wallets?
To my knowledge, the closest that anyone's kind of actually completed that loop would have been when Imogen put her song on Ethereum about 2.5 years ago now, I believe it was.
Okay, so there's nobody yet that has been able to that has done that with like a collection of music. We haven't seen that yet.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, I've been looking for it to see if that actually exists. So that was question number one. Number two, now this is the question really for Greg and for Kayvon. It is my understanding that we would be able to do this with RSong in part with Life ID and or mycelia. Would that be correct? Meaning, specifically, music, embedded identity, disbursement of tokens for those that actually listen to the song. Greg, if you're speaking, you're on mute, and Kayvon, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
I can't, yes, Kayvon, thank you. I can't speak for Life ID and mycelia, but I could speak for what RSong does and can do. And that's already built in, so it's basically monetizing the token. The token as the token is consumed, the contract in the back is a multi-sig contract, and it just distributes however we want to portion that token to all the wallets that are there.
Yes,
That's already
that's
there.
right. Yeah.
Okay.
So Fabian, can you check your chat?
Yes. Okay. Yes. So
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. Yeah. No worries. Okay. So in general, what you're saying is correct. We have the only solution that is actually counting the playbacks as a part of the playback solution, and I'm putting it up to blockchain with a smart contract and we expect there to be an identity solution soon, but we don't have the identity solution wired in yet, right? Because mycelia is still under development, right? The mycelia code base currently doesn't actually even engage with the blockchain all that much, right? It's a completely centralized solution. It doesn't have a blockchain back end.
So for an identity solution, I mean, I'm speaking about this as I think about mainnet, RSong, driving traffic to the platform, driving transactions. Do you believe that by the time we reach mainnet, that I guess will Life ID or mycelia be up and running to the point where we will be able to demonstrate this this capability?
I don't know, because that's completely out of my hands. I'm not driving those, right?
Understood.
Those are other groups that are developing. I recently spoke with mycelia folks, and we're very supportive of their efforts.
Mm-hmm.
We've also spoken with what is it, Berkshire? Christian, what was the name of the group? Berkshire Cloud. Berkshire Cloud, yeah. So when we spoke with the Berkshire Cloud, they also have a claim-based solution, a blockchain-supported claim-based solution. And I have urged both groups to think a little bit more deeply about their architecture. In particular, Rolang was designed from the very beginning nearly almost 10 years ago now. I made a design based upon an identity solution that was developed by Fred Fisher and myself and others around a notion of quality of identity, right? So you only reveal as much of your identity as is necessary for the transactions that you're engaged in, and no more. So people can't go on fishing expeditions about your personal private information. So this was when self-sovereign identity was first coming to the fore as a you know a desideratum. Um, in that architecture, what I illustrated or illuminated was that you could apply prologue style inferencing in a concurrency setting, so that you could do things like this will sound like a contrived example, but it can quickly become a much more interesting example. So you can have Alice claim that all men are mortal, and you can have Bob claim that Socrates is a man, and then the system can infer that if so if Charlie takes Alice's claim on faith and she takes Bob's claim on faith, then she can infer that Socrates is mortal. Now let's take that more abstract or contrived example into the real world. If Alice claims that she has seen Charlie at an Imogen, that she is currently seeing Charlie at an Imogen Heap concert, and she claims that she sees uh, um, uh, Bob, and uh, sorry, I've got the example turned around. So Alice claims that she sees Bob at a Imogen Heap concert, and she sees and Bob claims that he sees Charlie. Then you can infer that Charlie is at an Imogen Heap concert, right? And so David and Daphne can both infer, if they accept those claims, that Charlie is at the Imogen Heap concert, right? So this is very, very useful for establishing identity and for establishing a wide range of other kinds of claims. Claim is not just about stating a fact; it's what you can do with facts. And the prologue style inferencing is currently our best approach to the kind of inferencing that we typically apply to claims. The kind of logic that's applied in courts, the kind of logic that's applied in intelligence, and so on. So Rolang was designed from the beginning with all the components in order to make that kind of inferencing mechanism available almost for free. There's a little tiny thing that has to happen that can be done at the smart contracting level, but all of that happens in terms of built-in features in the language. So the reason I'm mentioning all this and going into this level of detail is because my hope is that Mycelia and Berkshire and other groups will collaborate and realize their claim-based mechanisms for identity and other kinds of claims inside our chain, so that we can have a very robust mechanism for identity that is at the same time allows us to make very sort of broad-ranging claims that are backed up by chains of inference, and at the same time only reveal that information which is strictly necessary for the transactions that people are participating in. So I believe that based upon my own experience implementing this stuff, that Mycelia and Berkshire and other partners could get this done with the existing code right now by the time we get to mainnet. Now, whether they will or not is a completely separate question.
Okay.
So this is really, really interesting for me, Greg, because I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I'm kind of involved. I'm still trying to wrap my head around what exactly Mycelia is planning on doing and working on in regards to the verification of attribution. Because one of the things that we are maybe still working on with Resonate is the concept of the identity social graph, which sounds kind of like what you're talking about, I think, if I'm understanding it right.
Yes, that's right. So what I'm describing are the building blocks that would allow for an identity social graph to emerge.
Exactly. Okay, cool. And that's built right into the code. I mean, that's super exciting.
It's baked into the language features. Yes.
So what I see a need for is an architecture, a platform that has an architecture that can make use of an identity social graph in order to start to explore this form of attribution verification. And I don't think, if I'm understanding the data hierarchy, if that's the right word, the data flow maybe is a better word. I don't know whether that is a project that Mycelia is directly attached to. And this is where these are some of the questions that I've been kind of having lately, as we kind of trying to restructure things, is where the overlap happens with the work that we're doing.
Yeah. So I feel that we're still sort of early in the requirements game. I look at the existing Mycelia effort not as the end game, but really as some smart people like Claire and Mark thinking about the domain, but from their perspective, right? And then they need to come in contact with people like myself or Berkshire Cloud that are thinking about it from a slightly different perspective. And then do a revision or an iteration on the mechanism, because once you think carefully about identity, I think people will come to the conclusion that in a world where we have self-sovereign identity, there is not a one-size-fits-all notion of identity. But there is a notion of being able to make claims and have those claims be interlocking in a certain way, so that the notion of assertion and agency are kind of in a recursive loop, right? Who's making the assertion? Well, how do I know them, right? Right. But when you put these things together, you get this kind of mutual dependency that unfolds, and it's just like real life, right? Like and that's why we have all kinds of crazy contract law, right? Because the person who makes a promise in a pub is not necessary, even though they look and walk and talk exactly like the same person on the altar. They are not necessarily the same person.
Right.
Right. So we've all experienced this. We know I know, like, I make a promise at one point and then the circumstances change, and then that question of, am I the same person? Can I keep that promise? Is a very deep and profound question, and it's something that's really important in terms of human behavior.
And it's so important that we kind of establish the kind of fundamental architecture in a way that kind of helps formulate norms for how people conduct themselves.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, this whole identity piece, mycelia, how people's it's such a huge part of the equation of how this is all going to work. You know, I've been spending a lot of time researching, reading, and writing about this, and figuring out how we could really exploit the RSong, you know, on a minimal level. You know, exploit it with maybe 20 songs or so around mainnet, and looking at what pieces do we have and what pieces need to be completed to allow for us to enter the space of being the first ones to actually demonstrate the possibility of this.
Yeah, and remember, it's not always being first that matters. In some ways, Xerox was first.
True.
With the Windows mouse, you know, interfaces, but it was really Microsoft and Apple that that made it popular and made most of the money off of it. So I really feel that it's not necessarily about being first, but it's about providing a solution that makes contact with the right people, right? The right people are served.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that it's easy to use, and the thing is very, very well thought, because when we do walk down the path of presenting this type of when we can demonstrate it, it really needs to be done to perfection. That way it's not something that can be torn apart, but it actually functions and can be utilized by other organizations that could potentially buy it or rent it or whatever it is that we decide to do with it.
And a well marketing machine. I think that goes a long way too.
What was that, Kayvon?
A very well marketing initiative as well.
100%. The marketing angle is isn't the hard part in my mind. It's really the being able to prove that it exists. Because if you have a roster of high-profile independent artists that own their music, and we're able to walk them through the process and have a really easy a CMS form for them to say, this is my name, this was the guitarist, the guitarist, here's his cryptocurrency wallet. Like there's a process that artists need to be able to walk through. And if we can think that every song will have anywhere between 5 to 10 musicians on it, or maybe just one, and a manager and a publisher, and connected to an ASCAP BMI, and all of those things are entered into the metadata, and associated with each of those names is a wallet, and that wallet, you know, could be the Rever wallet, whatever that wallet might be, that will then create, you know, again, multiple transactions on the platform and prove the case that this is something that that will exist in the world. Because a lot of people are working towards creating it, and if we can, and I think we have a lot of the building blocks to allow for us to pull it off.
Okay, cool. I think you're right, but I think Nora hit the nail on the head. You need to be able to say that it's what people want.
Yep.
And then your marketing almost takes care of itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you know, I'm always about the end-to-end scenario. So so from my point of view, things start to get much more practical if you talk about the experience of a ensemble of artists, a band or whatever, uploading content and uploading the metadata. So you go through like how easy it is for them to get content into the system, how easy it is from their point of view, you know, from their experience, to associate metadata with that content, and then how easy it is for someone to search for and find content on the basis either of other songs, or on the basis of the name of a song, or on the basis of artists or other kinds of things, and then how easy it is for them to, you know, what's the mechanism by which they are able to pay for the use of that content, and then what's the experience that the artists have in receiving their compensation and being able to utilize that. And this final step is really important, right? Because I think a lot of people have had a weird experience with financial platforms, PayPal as an example, where the final step is often painful, right? They've got money in their PayPal account, but getting it to their bank is painful, or getting it to a vendor can be painful. So the final step is also really important. They've received their compensation in crypto land, and how does that translate into buying a cup of coffee or buying new guitar strings or whatever it is, right? So mapping out that end-to-end experience, right, from artist to listener back to artist, right? What is that? What is each of those experiences? And how served do they feel? Are they annoyed in the process, or is it seamless? Is there a place where there's risk, or is there a place where they don't feel happy? That's the kind of thing that I think we really have to spend a lot of cycles on. Put a lot of attention and attention from multiple different angles, right? Just as a brief aside, I remember as a young researcher at MCC, the research think tank MCC, when I went to the School of Architecture at the University of Texas, and I saw the user interfaces designed by architects, like actual people who built buildings, and how they thought about the use of space was very different than how I thought about it as a computer scientist, right? So when we get multiple people with multiple different viewpoints on it, that's when it's going to start, actually serving people, right? It's one thing to have, an expert UI designer, take a stab at something, but it's another thing to have them sit next to an artist who doesn't have their experience with computers, right? And go through the design and say, well, this is confusing for me. Yeah.
Got it. Yep. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work.
Yeah, and another thing that I think about when I read Nora's chat, and I have a question for you, Nora. But one of the things is when Nora says that it's what people want, I also think about the audience, and I think that one of the things that I think people are really, really craving right now, that's sorely lacking in the world today, is meaningful social connections. Especially directly with the artists that they love. There's still too many artificial barriers put between the audience and the artist. And I think that I just fantasize one day about a system where the appreciator has equal value in the platform, and they can also engage in exciting ways. With each other and with the artists that they love. And I think that fans are just begging for something like that right now.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Well, one thing, like, I don't know, because I haven't used these platforms much in a very long time. Is it possible within the major platforms to pay it forward, to send a song or a playlist that you have carefully put together, that you pay for, to pay it forward and send it out to a friend or to a group of friends?
Yeah, so I've done that on Spotify, but they have to be members of, they have to subscribe to Spotify in order to get all the songs. Otherwise, like, a lot of them are blacked out. But yes, I created Ned's classic rock playlist, which if anybody's on Spotify, I can share with you. But it's limited. I think YouTube allows that, but they're all very, very limited because they want everybody who gets it to be subscribed. to that platform.
Yeah. So the subscription model is a barrier to it creates friction for the very thing that I think we want to support, right? What we want to what we'd want to support, and what I think everyone, every artist would love, is if one of their really enthusiastic fans could purchase some access to some of their songs and to give them to friends, because that would be like the best possible marketing, right?
So I see what you're saying. So you're saying I could create a gift out of my playlist?
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
or a rewards program.
I like the gift idea. I think that's really cool, that somehow, as the owner of the playlist, I can, maybe it'll cost me $25, but I would give that as stocking stuffers to my entire family and really make them listen to my music.
Exactly, right? And that goes back to Daryl's point about connecting,
Yeah.
right? One of the most basic ways that we connect is we share what is meaningful to us.
Yeah, but corporations, they pretend to care about connection, but they only want you to connect with music if you're connecting to it through their medium,
Yeah, but, this is an interesting sell point, that if we can prove this concept, that allowing the gifting of a playlist and have we support that, I think that's actually a really great opportunity right there.
Yeah, well, the playlist itself has a massive value, and it connects to what Nora was just saying. Like, the major labels' whole business model since the beginning of recorded music has been they are the curator.
Yep.
And they are the sole curator as a cartel. And so that's the model. And so breaking that open into like curated playlists by experts is the future. And a lot of people are thinking about this right now, of course.
I spent a lot of I was having a meeting yesterday with a VC who has a what do you call it, a rewards company on his platform. And the concept here is that in the future, on the chain, on the ledger, if I decide to post a playlist, there should be a way in the next few years for there to be an acknowledgement on the chain saying Fabian shared this playlist. And if a lot of my friends start listening to the Arcade Fire song on it and they start adding it to their playlist, there's a documentation of it, there's a recording of it, and there's some type of a tokenized reward system that happens because that has happened. Or if I decide to promote a show that's coming to Los Angeles, let's imagine Nico Case is coming to LA and I post it on Facebook and 10 friends buy tickets to Nico. There should be some way of that information being tracked and recorded, for that information locking into my, my digital ledger that's there forever. And if I decide to use my reward points to buy a beer, I can do it, or I could use it towards other things. But if I accumulate, 100 plus or whatever it is points on this reward system, I can then cash those for a meet and greet with the band or a free dinner or something like that. I think conceptually, and because of what the power of the ledger will allow for when it's built and when that comes in the future, the system of tracking how fans support their artists, how they're rewarded for promoting those artists is going to be it will eventually, somebody's going to end up doing it. And this is a conversation also I have with a lot of DJs. DJs generally don't like to promote on their Facebook pages, I just discovered this really great house track. Reason? DJs want to hold on to their tracks and be the original person who discovered the track and they broke the song. And in the chain, if I came out and said, I've discovered this great remix before anybody, I'm the first one to play it. And then you start seeing other people starting to tag onto it. That artist, if that DJ, if that song breaks, can be the one that gets the recognition for discovering the song. And what happens a lot in DJ culture is that someone will post a song, people run off with their Shazam and they'll grab the song, and then somebody else gets the credit for breaking the song. And it's usually, a DJ that has a much larger fan base than the guy that originally finds it. So yeah, this is, I think the blockchain reward system is, again, it's part of the overall ecosystem of how this ties into streaming music, onto how it works for ticket sales in the future, how it works for talking about your favorite band, what the economy of it is, how it actually financially works. I think about it a lot. I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about how these things connect, because this is the future of where everything is going. It's just a matter of of really connecting all these dots, and also seeing what technologies are being created along the way that can then be integrated onto a platform that could all tie together to allow for this to happen.
Yeah. So one thing Daryl said I want to circle back to is the stranglehold of the publishers on musicians. So the more I think about it, this will allow the preservation of musicians' work into future generations. So for instance, Bach, when he died, his son, who was convinced he was the devil, destroyed 2/3 of his manuscripts.
Oh, wow.
Mendelssohn, due to anti-Semitism, when Mendelssohn died, they destroyed some huge percentage of his music, some of which was resurfaced a couple of years ago when it was his 200th anniversary. But if we remove this from the publishers and give this right through sovereign identity back to the musicians, it will allow preservation of their works way into the future.
I agreed.
Yeah.
Although I think it's not the publishers really, it's the record labels that own the recordings.
Well, they're the copyright holders today, right? Because back then it was, the publishers own the copyrights, right? So.
Right.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I think
same concept. Yeah.
But I think we're recognizing also the shifting landscape, right? The landscape was that recording to a certain level of quality used to be just the purview of the major labels, and that's just no longer the case, and hasn't been the case for decades now. And similarly, distribution was the purview of a much larger, a highly capitalized operation. But with the internet and with blockchain, that's also within the reach of just the ordinary garage band. So all of that has to change. The market realities have to change, right? And I think now what we want to do is recognizing that, what kind of musical world do we want to build, right? And for me, I keep tying it back to how is music going to serve us in coordinating each other and helping each other focus on what's really at hand. Because what's really at hand is that we have to modify our consumption and supply chain management behaviors dramatically, right? And in the past, music has played that role, right? If you think about the 60s and the kind of social revolutions that took place, music was such an important part of that revolution, right? It helped shape human thought. It helped shape the feeling and the zeitgeist, and enabled a major transformation of society, right? It was a key. It had a key role in the organization and agency in a pivotal transformation in society. We are at that same juncture now. Yeah, agreed. It helps stopping a war, correct, right? So we need to recognize its power here, and then think about, as we craft this service and the people we want to help, right? Who are the people we want to help most of all? And how do we want to serve? And I believe that the artists and the listeners who are these agents of change, and most of them are going to be the younger generation. Most of them are going to be Generation Z and beyond.
Yeah,
Generation Alpha, exactly.
Yep. It's the children of millennials. Everything that we're talking about doing, be it the new streaming platform, ticketing, to virtual reality, new social media platform, the next MySpace, it's all about Generation Alpha, at least in my mind. That's what I think. I
absolutely agree. And it's so fascinating to kind of follow with what Greg pointed out about the 60s, which was the second wave of the boomer generation.
Mm-hmm.
when that particular wave of the boomer generation reached that pivotal window of age between 18 and 25, that's when the music came out as the catalyst to instigate the change. And so we see it following. So the generation that I was part of I was on the cusp of boomer and Gen X. I was born in 1964, right on that cusp. And so when I reached the age of 18 to 26, it was punk rock and hip hop. And those two forms of music, identified with, defined me. And then you follow through the Gen X generation, which happened in Seattle with grunge. And it was fascinating to witness that occur because it happened just before the web. And the way the word spread out about Nirvana was through the hallways of high schools. And it transmitted very rapidly. And it created literally a revolution in the music industry, and again defined another generation. And so here we are now with a new generation, Generation Z, which was kids born between 1995 and nowish, and they're reaching that perfect age. So there's going to be another wave that's about to happen, and music will lead the wave just like it always does.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will.
So then to tie it back, when I think about the end-to-end scenario from artist to audience and back to artist, right? That scenario, in my mind, the people I want to support most, when I run through that, are those people, right? I'm thinking about the Generation Z and Generation Alpha, right, and how to support them. And when I kind of run those in my mind, or to be honest, when I go out and do, like I'll sample, what my daughters are doing and what my sons are doing, and sort of check in with them. Well, how is information flowing through your clique? How is information flowing through your crowds? And and wanting to support those activities, because those are the people who are going to bear most of the burden of what's coming.
Yep, absolutely. That generation is the generation that has to come up with serious phase shifting solutions first.
That's exactly right.
I think it's really necessary.
I just want to help out, whichever way I can. It's something that I was going to point out. Now I lost my train of thought.
Well, let Rudy jump in. He was about to say.
Yeah, my train of thought will leave quickly, so I better do it. I think it's good to keep two things in mind at once, at least two. One is that while we're building a system that does all the things we're talking about, and I'm not completely clear in my own mind as to what it is we're talking about, but let's assume that it's amazing and wonderful. The second thing we have to keep in mind is the planet itself and where that's going. And I think if you're talking about what music has done for communicating possibilities for change, we don't want to overstate that. It's done that for sure, but the one possibility that it needs to start talking about is the planet and the future of the planet. Because without that, we become an archaeological curiosity very, very shortly.
Yeah, well, here's how I see the connection happening.
All right.
I see a music-based social network that's a streaming service that provides these things that we've been talking about, these direct solutions between artist and appreciator, and this new kind of definition of how a social network can actually function to create true meaningful connections with smaller tribes that can grow to be bigger tribes. And this new music-based social network forms the initial norms for a platform that grows out of music into other things. So music, once again, is the catalyst that provides the new organizational structure for the phase shift that the millennials and the post-millennials will help implement.
Yeah, to the extent that you can separate it from personal narcissism, that would probably work pretty well.
Well, see, this is the part where the norms have to really play an important part.
Well, I actually think it's you know there's another way out of that, Rudy, which is that what we want to do is align interests, right? It's a kind of Tai Chi thing. So when I thought about our song, I really thought about the Tai Chi of the various forces. So the audience in general is not a driving force, right? It's not an affirmative force. It's largely a receptive force, right? They receive something. And where did they receive it from? Who are the drivers? The drivers in general are the artists. The artist has some kind of burning thing inside them that makes them want to express themselves in music. Whatever it is, it's like they feel called to do that, right? And that's what's driving them. And then they are seeking or pursuing the audience that most resonates with their expression, right? The music that's flowing through them.
Yeah.
And so when I think about our song, the first group I want to serve are the artists. And it's not because the audience is less valuable or less important, but rather I'm just following the flow.
Yeah.
The flow initiates from the artist, so we serve them first, and then the second and in the second phase, then we serve the audience, and then we complete the cycle, and then we go back from the audience to the artist. So literally, the end-to-end scenario that I was talking about is also happening at this higher level, right? In terms of the prioritization of what it is we're doing, right? So again, and I'm talking about brass tacks here. I don't know about anybody else, but I keep all of this context is what I'm holding in my mind as I'm working with the team that did the RSong UI, and I'm working with the team that did the RSong backend. What I'm thinking about first and foremost is what is serving the artist, and I think that there are two things that serve the artist. First and foremost, it needs to be a recording and delivery mechanism for that is unprecedented in quality, right? And that's what the RSong, the immersion codec, and the immersion technologies provide. And we've seen that again and again and again in terms of the artist experience. When the artists come in contact with this particular audio technology as a means of recording and distributing their sonic experience, the thing that they want to deliver, they are profoundly moved. Absolutely, Christian. So we're serving the artist in that way, and they can't get that anywhere else. There's nowhere else to go for this. And then the second piece is to make sure that the accounting and reporting is fair and open and above board, right? So those two things alone, in my opinion, are embodied in the RSong offering, and it's enough to drive a wide range of artists to that offering. And then the next wave, and like Kayvon can tell you this, right? Like first we just get some material out there, but the second wave is we think about it from the audience's perspective. So they come to this platform, and let's say that there are now 1,000 tunes on RSong. Well, even at 1,000 tunes, it's too long a list to just scroll through. So we need a search feature, right? So the very first set of features we prioritize are, being able to get content up and being able to get metadata associated with it. The second set of features are, now that it's there, how is someone who's using it going to find it, right? And then we can start talking about another set of features. So the feature that I was talking about with respect to the playlist and gifting, right? We want to be able to do that. Another thing that I've been speaking frequently now with Elon Levy from VibeChain, and I'm I'm interested in this. I have an above board, openly stated ulterior motive, which is how to get people to coordinate. And the Vibe chain technology, which is what I would effectively call smart playlist technology, right? How do you get a group of people to collectively agree on a playlist? That's for if I'm targeting Generation Z and Generation Alpha, I want them to have a low risk taste of collective intelligence, right? So selecting songs on a playlist is low risk, and it's something that a group of Generation Z and Generation Alpha folks can get into. They can have a good time with, but they'll also be passionate about, right? I can't tell you how excited I am because my children are so passionate about music. It's amazing, right? And so it's
like a form of voting where you, rather than vote yes,
yes,
or you kind of can apply color to it, like you were talking about the other day.
Exactly. So they get experience with a system that helps elicit the collective intelligence. And once they have that experience, then they can begin to reapply that experience to more pressing problems, right? So that's the way I'm thinking about RSong, and that's so again, I'm trying to put it in a context. What's the actual context here? What does the market look like, and how does that relate to pressing needs in the world, and then architect the features in a way and according to a priority of the backlog that matches those requirements. So to me, this is all of this conversation, even though it seems like it's wandering all over the map, it's not.
I agree. I have actually a really direct architectural question for you, Greg.
What's that?
You were saying before that that the subscription model might not serve the concepts well. I'm kind of curious to hear more about that, because I'm kind of pro subscription model myself right now.
So I was literally just following Ned's train of thought, right? Which was that if he sends a playlist to his family members or his friends, then based upon their subscription, a big chunk of that playlist can be blacked out. And what we'd want is some kind of loss leader mechanism or some kind of promotion mechanism, so that Ned could send a playlist, and even though the content is not in the recipient's subscription, they gain access to it as a result of Ned's gift. So Ned pays it forward, right? And they have some, limited access to the content on the playlist, which would then, like, if they like it, and like, let's say that they have three times through the playlist access, right? At the end of that, they may want to listen to it a fourth time, and they go, shoot, it's no longer there. Well, how do I go and add it, right? And then they're called into further engagement, right? I mean, this is just marketing 101.
I think, though, on the case of Ned or anyone sharing a playlist on Spotify, outside of rewards, anyone can listen to it. They just have, if you have a subscription with Spotify, it's easy. If you don't, you get commercials. So after every 3 to 4 songs, there's an advertisement, and that's how people are still able to access that playlist. They just have to listen to commercials.
Okay, yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm unfamiliar with the details. I remember I thought it was the most, like, when I first started engaging with iTunes, I thought it was the most basic feature. I want to give this song to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
And I don't want to give them an iTunes gift card. No, I want to give them this song.
Yeah.
I think Spotify could have also changed it. Like years ago, they would black it out, and like iTunes does, and now it could be that they just throw in commercials.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. Most people don't seem to mind commercials. I hate them with a passion.
Yeah, I was recently introduced to a kind of a different idea. My whole kind of attitude about advertising has been very much inspired by Jaron Lanier, who said that building a system on advertising is like getting nourishment from connecting a tube from your anus to your mouth. And so I kind of, through that, I kind of always kind of, adopted this kind of anti-advertising attitude. But I recently had my head turned actually by Peter Harris, who turned me on to this whole concept of empowerment advertising, which I had never really heard about before, where you can basically make advertising work for the people rather than for the biggest companies in the world.
Oh, there's no question about that, right? I mean, if you think about it, right, anyone who's engaged in social media right now is in some way engaged in marketing and advertising, whether they're marketing memes or they're marketing a way of life or a point of view or an argument. They are essentially advocating for and marketing, right? And to a certain extent, that's not a bad thing, right? It's how society functions.
Yeah, well, I guess the idea of empowerment advertising involves a system where rather than it being an opt-out, it's an opt-in. So, right now with Spotify, you can opt out of advertising by paying for the subscription, which is an interesting way to do it. But what about a system where rather than choosing to opt out, you can choose to actually accept advertising and use that as a way of funding the community that you're in.
Oh, absolutely. No, that was the scenario model.
Oh, it was. Okay, I didn't actually know that. I knew about the idea of amps, but I didn't realize it was that.
Yeah. That's the whole scenario model in a nutshell. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I record shows I like that are on network TV, so I could skip through the commercials. But one thing I miss is like all the new movie announcements. There's stuff I miss. And, I may not object to a 15-second new movie trailer every 30 minutes or 20 minutes from some show. But you're right, I should be able to opt into that type of advertising. And it just shows the lack of creativity on, network TV, et cetera, leadership.
Yeah. Well, you have to remember that a lot of this came from broadcast media where people were literally captive to their televisions. And the people who are driving marketing now are still, there's lots of holdover from that earlier model.
Yeah.
It's going to take a long time to realize that it's not a television, it's a phone.
A big ass phone, but it's a phone.
It's two-way. Yeah, I have to jump off. I think Christian has to jump off.
Are we in the Christian, or we're in a different room?
We are in a different room.
Okay, cool.
Westford, yeah.
All right.
Great talk, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.